coping with California's economic crisis. We're joined this morning by David Crane, Special Advisor to Governor Schwarzenegger for Jobs and Economic Growth, and a special Squawk exclusive, along with our guest host here, Tom Steyer of Farallon Capital Management. David, welcome. Good to see you.
Good morning.
I don't know if you heard our discussion at the top of the show, or top of the hour anyway, about California. Just give us a sense as to how long-lasting this solution that we're seeing right now come together will be.
Well, Tom's comments earlier were right on, that this sort of crisis had to happen in California. It was inevitable that we have this dysfunctional tax system and this dysfunctional budgeting system. So long-term, the solution will only come from a resolution of those two systems. So the budget settlement that the governor and the legislature agreed to this week gets us through this year. But it doesn't solve the long-term problem, which will only will be solved by tax reform, budget reform that he's been going after now for 5.5 years, and pension reform, which is really lurking in the background, and it's going to have a huge impact on all states.
Is there the political will to do that?
I think so. You know, we have 17 months left in our term, and the governor, better than anybody I know, knows that there's a time for things. So he's tried since the day he took office to reform California's budget system for the reasons that Tom mentioned, where you've got this incentive in California for legislators to spend every dollar of surge revenues rather than save any of them, and to make promises long-term without funding them. You have that incentive, and he's tried from day one to solve it 3 times. He went to the voters and to the legislature. They said no. But you need a crisis. You know, I found that in government, you need a crisis for things to get done. We have that crisis now. California voters recognize that this problem exists. And I think that the political will is now there for these things to happen in the next 17 months.
Yeah. If they don't recognize it now, they're going to, when their municipalities, right, start telling them we can't provide X or Y for you because the money's not coming in from the state level. Right? I mean, some of the local stories, which we don't talk about much on a national basis, are terrifying.
It's already happened. Vallejo, for example, in the Bay Area, has already declared bankruptcy. 70% of their budget goes to compensation for past employees as well as current employees. So you're going to see that with a lot of municipalities all around the country, not just in California because of these unfunded liabilities.
David, I was saying earlier that we had to take a comprehensive look at the whole system, that it was dysfunctional partially because of the way that it was built up. Do you think that the right forum for that is the governor and the legislature, or do you think that we need to have a constitutional convention where citizens get together, look at the entire package, and decide what needs to be changed?
I think you should bifurcate that. The tax reform, which we will announce a radical tax reform, I believe, in September, and the governor today will make notice of a plan to call a special session in that regard. Tax reform, budget reform, and pension reform can all take place at the legislative level. The relationship between state and local governments and the initiative process that you mentioned earlier, that has to be handled, I think, in some sort of constitutional convention. But a constitutional convention in California, you know, this is a state of 38 million people, and pulling together 400 people in a constitutional convention, you know, is a risky process. So how you go about picking those 400 people, the devil is in that detail.
I'm looking at your notes. I'm shocked. So you're telling me that 38 million people, but a huge amount of taxation comes from how many people?
144,000.
Out of 38 million.
Pay 50% of all the personal income tax, which is responsible for 50% of our general fund.
Spielberg and the movie types? Who the heck?
Well, that's well beyond that. We tax capital gains and stock option revenues as ordinary income in California. So it's anybody whose income, it's really basically our budget system, our tax system is correlated with Wall Street, not California's own economy.
California, we think about that being New York, so you're talking about California. Do you see, is it a bad idea to kill the goose that laid the golden egg? I mean, or should these be the people that were soaked? Should we soak the rich? We got to soak somebody.
No, I don't think we should soak the rich. It's detrimental to economic growth. I mean, the people that get hurt if you soak the rich are the people that well below the rich in California. And we have a corporate income tax problem in California, which has really hurt economic growth in the Central Valley of California in particular. So that's why you're going to see the tax reform that the governor is going to announce, if we can pull all this together, which, as I mentioned earlier, in a crisis is when you can pull these sorts of things together. You're going to see something which will be quite radical, a radical reform of the personal income tax, a very radical reform of the corporate income tax, and a very radical
reform.
Well,
if we look at this as a microcosm of the federal government, can't you talk to Congress about how to pay for health care, that it's probably not such a great idea to do it with the top 1%?
I have enough trouble understanding about the way things work in California to give advice to the federal government.
But killing the goose is not such a great idea, and we can all learn from that.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
David, can I ask you one more question, which is, one of the things that I observe in California, but which you can read in any poll, is in what low esteem the governing system in California, not so much the governor, but certainly the legislature and the elected officials, are held by the citizens, shows in polling, but also in anecdotal evidence of walking around the state and talking to your friends. How is that going to change? Because it seems to me that for the system to really be reworked, it's not just a process question, it's a relationship between the citizenry and their government. People have to believe that their government is responsible and careful with their money and going to provide needed services in an effective way. How is that going to change?
I think we have to prove to them that positive change can happen at the governmental level. And as I said earlier, change can't happen in government. As opposed to business, change cannot happen unless there's a crisis.
Yeah, but let me ask you this. If you're looking at a crisis and you're trying to use that as a way to change the system the way it's been built up, it seems like an incredibly difficult time to try and explain to people that the wealthiest 144,000 people in your state need bigger tax cuts. It seems like that's easier to do when everybody's feeling a little more wealthy.
Yeah, and I think it won't be presented that way. It'll be much more of a comprehensive reform, including reforms to other taxes which have a big impact on the people of California. What? The corporate income tax and the way the sales tax works in California. So I think if it's all done as part of a big package, a comprehensive package, it can be presented in a successful way.
I wonder if you think the way, I mean, I hate to stereotype people who live in California, but
I'll do it anyway.
All 38 million of it.
Given the political leanings of the state, right? Do you think a soak the rich proposal would fly better there than perhaps in any other state where there are a lot of high-income earners?
It has worked that way ever since Proposition 13 in California, where we capped the property tax and became more dependent upon the income tax.
Yeah.
Who's the easiest group to pass an income tax increase on? The rich.
And they don't seem to mind the way they would in Florida or in New York.
Well, let me say this. The issue with what Joe's talking about, the 144,000 people and their income taxes, from my point of view, regardless of what's fair, and I think people felt this was fair, and I don't think people have necessarily changed the idea that this is not fair. I think the point is it's really volatile. These are not incomes like you get if you work as a teacher or if you work as, in a big company where you have a set income. These incomes move around a lot. That's one of the big reasons we've had this huge revenue shortfall, is because the rates haven't changed, the incomes have changed.
But as a high-income earner in that state, Tom, isn't there a point at which you or others would say that's enough? I mean, we're happy to carry the lion's share of the load, but this is ridiculous. I actually am one of the anomalies who really feels like paying taxes is a high-class problem. If you're paying that much tax, you must be making a lot of money. So that's not something I worry about. The truth of the matter is California, over the last 25 years, as I said earlier, has reduced its tax burden as a percent of GDP by 15%. So the fact is there have been a lot of tax cuts in other places.
But you guys focus a lot on the tax system in California, and you're going to see a reform there. You need to focus on something affecting California and all the states in a very big way, which are these growing, unfunded pension liabilities. They're going to dwarf everything else. They're going to squeeze out all discretionary funding in these state budgets. And that's the tax system is a big issue. And I think the voters of California and the citizens are going to understand a change there. What they're not understanding, and people aren't seeing right now because of the accounting, is what's happening in all the programs they care about because of paying off past pension promises. Right.
Well, what happens, I mean, how do you solve that? Do you have to renege on the promises?
Wouldn't the market help there as well?
You're going to have to, look, the promises they're contractual. It's worse than Social Security and Medicare in one big way. They're not contractual. Congress can change those and will change those. But these are contractual. We owe them unconditionally.
Well, that's what we thought about the GM retirees, too. But they all got,
but GM can go broke. The state can't go broke. We have the power to tax. Local jurisdictions can go broke.
What would solve that then? What if the market goes back to 14,000? That won't help?
Not really. They have been unaccruing these liabilities for so long that it's going to take decades to pay off these obligations. And the portions of general funds that they're going to take it's just going to grow to record heights.
It was hurt by the sell-off down to 6,000, but it's not going to be helpful.
That was almost of a manifestation of a bigger problem.
Really?
They've been assuming high investment yields for decades. They've been assuming that they could earn. It's not as if Tom Steyer is running these pension funds where they should legitimately assume a high investment yield. But these are funds that have been assuming very high yields that they're going to earn them in perpetuity for decades through the end of this century. Not going to happen. So this fall off is a manifestation of the reversion to the mean. So the only way to solve it is to reform the pension systems. But this will not address
Tom. I mean, he's right here. I mean, you mentioned that. I mean, you're not going to cut your.
He's a patriot. I think he's going to be willing to do it.
That's a lot of weight on your shoulders. The entire pension system in California is going to be on your.
We're counting on you.
Yeah. and then all the other services are dependent on the pension being paid off. So, are you ready?
I'm absolutely ready.
David, please come back. You're really at the eye of the storm. Appreciate your insight.
Thank you.